The sun over Sumatra was not a friend. It was a white hammer smashing down on the earth. June 27th, 1943. The Palembang prison camp. The air smelled of swamp water, unwashed bodies, and fear. 127 women stood in ragged lines in the Appel Square. British, Australian, Dutch. Once they were nurses, teachers, and civilians. Now they were ghosts in skin and bone. But there was one woman who refused to fade. Captain Margaret Dryburgh, 39 years old, Royal Army Medical Corps. Before the war, she was the finest trauma surgeon in Singapore. She had hands that could stitch a nerve back together, hands that saved lives. But on this day, those hands would become the target of an empire's rage. The camp sergeant, a man known for his cruelty, screamed at the women. He held a document, the No Escape Pledge. He demanded every prisoner sign it. To sign meant you promised never to run. To sign meant you accepted your fate as a slave. Margaret Dryburgh stepped forward. She looked the sergeant in the eye. "I will not sign," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent square. Colonel Nakamura Shigeru, the camp commandant, watched from the shade of the guardhouse. He did not intervene. He let the sergeant handle it. The sergeant didn't yell. He simply raised his rifle. He didn't aim the barrel. He used the heavy wooden butt. He swung it with the force of a lumberjack swinging an axe. The sound was sickening, like a dry branch snapping in a storm. The rifle butt connected with Margaret's left forearm. The bone shattered instantly. She didn't fall. Not yet. She gasped, her knees buckling, but she stayed upright. So the sergeant swung again, harder. This time he aimed for the right arm. Crack! Margaret dropped to the red dust. Both of her arms hung uselessly at her sides. They were bent at angles that nature never intended. The pain was white-hot, a blinding flash that wiped out the world. Behind her, the other prisoners screamed. But Margaret bit her lip until it bled. She refused to give him the satisfaction of a cry. Colonel Nakamura watched her fall. His face was carved from stone. He turned to his guards. "Take her to the cage," he ordered. "Let the rain finish what we started."
Life in Palembang was a slow death. Malaria, beriberi, dysentery. The women were wasting away, but they had a secret weapon. They called her the Spoon Doctor. Margaret's arms never fully straightened. They were locked at a 45-degree angle. Her hands were clawed, unable to grip tightly. But she didn't stop working. She adapted. She learned to hold a scalpel between her first two fingers, like a cigarette. She stole sulfonamide tablets right under the guards' noses, hiding them in her hair. She performed surgeries on the dirt floor of Hut 7, using a razor blade boiled in rainwater and light from a hurricane lamp made from a jam tin and cooking oil. Every night she crawled from hut to hut, sometimes on her knees because she was too weak to walk. She whispered to the dying women. "Stay angry, darling," she would say. "Anger keeps the heart beating when hope has packed its bags." And it worked. The death rate fell from 3 a week to 3 a month. She was saving them. But while Margaret was saving the prisoners, the enemy was facing his own tragedy. Colonel Nakamura lived in a large residence on the hill overlooking the camp. He lived there with his wife, Keiko. Keiko was 24, delicate, city-bred, and she was 8 months pregnant. The humid heat of Sumatra was destroying her. She grew paler every day. Nakamura requested a military doctor from HQ, But the Japanese High Command refused. They would not send a qualified obstetrician to a remote prison camp for women. It was beneath them. March 12, 1944, the crisis arrived. Keiko went into labor. It was too early, and something was wrong. The baby was breech, feet first. Keiko was bleeding heavily. The camp doctor, a nervous young lieutenant, took one look at the situation and panicked. He told Nakamura there was nothing he could do. "She will die," he said, "and the child with her." Nakamura stood on his veranda, listening to his wife's screams. He was a proud man, a samurai descendant, but he was also a husband. He looked down at the camp, at the smoke rising from Hut 7. He knew there was only one person in Sumatra who had the skill to save them, the woman whose arms he had ordered broken. He swallowed his pride. He wrote an order on a piece of paper. He handed it to the guard. "Bring the English doctor immediately. Chains optional."
The punishment cage was 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. It had bamboo bars and no roof. That night, the monsoon arrived. The rain came down in sheets, turning the floor of the cage into thick, sucking mud. Margaret lay in the filth. Her arms were screaming with agony. Every heartbeat sent a fresh wave of fire through her body. Most people would have gone into shock. Most people would have died before morning. But Margaret Dryburgh was a surgeon. She knew exactly what was happening inside her body. The bones were misaligned. The muscles were seizing. If she didn't act now, the arms would heal crooked. Or worse, gangrene would set in. She needed a doctor, but she was the only doctor, and she had no hands to use. It was 2 a.m. when she found it, half buried in the mud. A rusted metal tablespoon, dropped by a careless guard during dinner. It was dirty, it was bent, but to Margaret, it looked like a surgical instrument. She formulated a plan that seemed impossible. She couldn't use her hands, so she would use the rest of her body. She sat up, groaning as the movement shifted her broken bones. She picked up the spoon with her toes. She brought her foot up to her mouth and took the handle of the spoon between her teeth. The metal tasted of rust and blood. She maneuvered the bowl of the spoon under her left arm right at the break point. She wedged it against the bamboo bars of the cage. This was it, the physics of leverage. She bit down hard on the handle. She pushed with her body weight. She used the spoon as a fulcrum to pry her own bone back into alignment. The pain was beyond description. It felt like her arm was being torn off. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. If she screamed, the guards would come back and finish her. So she screamed internally. She pushed. And then, a wet, grinding click. The radius bone snapped back into place. She blacked out for a second. When she woke up, she was panting, sweat mixed with the rain on her face. One down, one to go. She repeated the process on the right arm. This time she knew the pain that was coming. That made it harder, but she thought of the women in the huts, the women who needed her. She bit down, she pushed, click. She slumped against the bars, exhausted, but she wasn't done. She used her teeth to tear strips of wood from the bamboo floor. She used her feet to rip strips of cloth from her petticoat. For the next 3 hours, working only with her teeth and feet, she splinted her own arms. When the sun rose, the guards came to collect the body. They expected a corpse. Instead, they found Captain Dryburgh sitting upright. Her arms were bound tight. Her eyes were burning with a fury that made the sergeant take a step back. She looked at Colonel Nakamura. She didn't speak. She just stared. The colonel looked at her splinted arms, then at the spoon lying in the mud. He realized what she had done. For the first time in the war, he felt something other than contempt. He felt respect. "Let her go back to the huts," he ordered, and for 7 days, the beatings stopped. They carried Margaret up the hill on a stretcher made of rice sacks. She looked like a ghost. Her uniform was rags. Her face was swollen from malnutrition. Her arms were still bent, the scars of the breaks visible under her skin. They laid her on the polished floor of the commandant's residence. It was surreal. Teak furniture, silk curtains, the smell of jasmine incense, a stark contrast to the mud and filth she lived in. Colonel Nakamura was waiting. He didn't stand over her this time. He dropped to his knees in the dust beside the stretcher. "My wife is dying," he said. His English was perfect, educated. "Save her and the child. Anything you need is yours." Margaret looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes. She could have let them die. It would have been justice, karma. War is about killing the enemy, isn't it? But Margaret Dryburgh wasn't just a soldier. She was a healer. She sat up, wincing as her back cracked. "Bring me hot water," she said. Her voice sounded like gravel dragged across coral. "Clean towels, real light, and take these bloody chains off my ankles." Nakamura obeyed instantly. He carried her into the bedroom himself. The situation was critical. Kiko was unconscious. Her pulse was a fluttering bird. The baby was stuck. Margaret tried to lift her hands to examine the patient, but her arms wouldn't lift high enough. The muscles had atrophied. She realized she couldn't do this alone. "I need hands," she barked at Nakamura. "Get me 2 of my nurses from the camp, now!" 10 minutes later, 2 Australian prisoners were rushed into the room. They became Margaret's hands. Margaret stood by the bed, directing every move like a conductor. "Turn her on her left side. Elevate the hips with rolled blankets. Give me the forceps. No, the short ones." She had to use her teeth to grip the instruments to pass them to the nurses. She used her elbows to apply pressure to Kiko's abdomen. She used her forehead to wipe sweat from her eyes. But the baby wouldn't move. The shoulder was impacted. Time was running out. Margaret knew she had 1 card left to play, a maneuver she learned in the slums of Glasgow years ago. It required strength she didn't have, but she had leverage. She leaned her body weight against the bed. She hooked her 2 crooked fingers, the ones that couldn't straighten, into the birth canal. She used her deformity as a tool. She hooked the baby's shoulder, and she pulled. She rotated her entire body, using gravity to do the work her muscles couldn't. A wet slide, a release of pressure. And then, silence. A baby girl slid into the world. Blue, still, silent. The room held its breath. Margaret didn't hesitate. She leaned down and delivered 1 sharp slap to the soles of the baby's feet. A gasp, then a thin, furious cry filled the room. It was the loudest sound in the world. Kiko opened her eyes. Nakamura stood in the doorway, his uniform unbuttoned, his face wet with tears. He looked at the baby. Then he looked at the broken British prisoner sitting in a pool of blood on his floor. He walked over to her, and he bowed. A full, 90-degree bow, deep respect. "Name her," Nakamura whispered. Margaret looked up, blood on her teeth from biting her lip to stay awake. "Name her Hope," she said. "The war has taken enough." From that night forward, everything changed. A proper hospital hut was built from bamboo and palm thatch. Red Cross parcels, which used to be stolen by the guards, suddenly appeared on the prisoners' bunks. Medicines appeared under pillows. The beatings became rare. 127 women survived the war because of that one night, because one doctor refused to let hate make the decision. The war ground on for another year. Margaret kept a diary on cigarette papers hidden inside sanitary towels. Entry, September 3rd, 1944. Arms ache like living fire today, but baby Hope smiled at me through the fence. Her father saluted me when he thought no one saw. Strange world we have made. August 1945, the atomic bombs fell. Japan surrendered. The guards vanished into the jungle like smoke. When the Australian army arrived to liberate the camp, they arrested Colonel Nakamura as a war criminal. Before they let him away in chains, he asked for one last request. He wanted to see Captain Dryburgh. They brought him to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cedar box. He handed it to her. Inside was the spoon, the same rusted spoon she had used to set her arms, but now it was polished to a mirror shine and it was wrapped in silk cut from his wife's wedding kimono. He bowed one final time, and then he was gone. Margaret returned to England in 1946. Her arms remained permanently bent. The War Office told her she would never operate again. She proved them wrong. By 1955, she was a senior surgeon in London, teaching a generation of students that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear stop you. She kept the spoon on her bedside table until the day she died. Fast forward to 1995. Palembang, Sumatra. The old camp was gone, replaced by a stone monument. Survivors gathered for a memorial service, old women in wheelchairs wearing their medals, and with them stood a Japanese woman, 51 years old, Dr. Hope Nakamura, an obstetrician from Tokyo. The baby Margaret saved. She held up the spoon to the crowd. Some enemies become family the moment one refuses to let the other die, she said. She placed the spoon in a glass case beside Margaret's photograph. Today that spoon still sits there, a piece of rusted metal that shines brighter than gold. It is a reminder that even when the world goes mad, even when your bones are broken, you can still deliver hope. If this story touched your soul, share it, because the world needs more people like Margaret Dryburgh. This is Ghost Unit Archives. Thank you for watching.